for the Sega Genesis, released in March of 1993. I believe it was published by Sega.
Oh, in-house.
But Western developers who I'd never heard of made the game.
Okay.
And it was. It came out in 1993, and I got this game for my birthday back in 1990. I guess it would have been 1993 at the end because it came out in March. My birthday's in November, so I would have gotten it the following November for my Sega Genesis. And it's one of my favorite games of all time.
Really?
It is supposedly, it is. And it's probably because I owned it, and when you're a kid, you only own a handful of games that you have to replay over and over again because that's all you have to play, right? So, let me ask you, are there games from your childhood that objectively speaking, they suck, but, you love them because it's all you had?
Yeah, I mean, there's games that you've played, ooh, this hasn't aged well at all, or it just really wasn't that good when I play it back.
Right, but you love it. You'll play it because it's like, oh, this was my childhood.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of anything.
You didn't own all bangers, Lou. Come on.
No, I didn't. But especially when we did the PlayStation countdown list, I'm like, yeah, I didn't have that. I didn't have that. I didn't have that.
Right.
You really put me. I'll come back to me. I'll get back to you on that.
Come back to you. That's fine. It's okay. Well, I was totally putting you on the spot there. But this was a game that I owned, and I want to talk about it. Games like this are the reason I wanted to make a retro gaming podcast, because this is not a game that gets talked about a lot. It really isn't. X-Men 2 Clone. If you're talking old school X-Men games, it's either the arcade game, which gets talked about the most, or it's maybe one of the ones on PlayStation or Xbox, like X-Men Legends, or it's one of the fighting games like Marvel vs. Capcom or X. You know what I mean? This one doesn't get a lot of love, or it's like one of the shitty ones on Nintendo.
Yeah.
This was not a shitty X-Men game. Now, I will say this is one of the hardest games I owned as a kid. I've never beaten this game.
Really?
My brother has. I've never beaten this game. But I want to talk about it. So it is, in the game, you are playing as 4 of the X-Men. You got Cyclops, you got Gambit, you got Wolverine, and you've got Nightcrawler. And you basically go through missions in the Danger Room. And if you remember the Danger Room, that was kind of their training room that did simulations. And what's happening in this game, the story, is that someone has hacked the Danger Room. Spoiler alert, it's Magneto. And essentially made the Danger Room simulations real.
Yep.
So that when they go into the Danger Room missions, they're actually getting hurt. And so every time they come out of the Danger Room, and it's kind of meta too, because it's really cool. What they're saying is every mission they come out of, because the levels, obviously like any video game, the levels get harder and harder. And so every time you come out of a mission, you're like, Professor, what's going on? This is dangerous. He goes, I know. It appears that every time you re-enter the Danger Room simulation, the realism gets turned up a notch, and it's more dangerous each time. So it's like they're making the game harder by saying that the simulation within the game is being made harder by this virus that Magneto injects into the Danger Room. So anyway, I thought that was incredibly meta. But the goal is basically you go through each level. There's 6 levels, I believe, and you get to the end, you fight a boss, you move on. That's it. It's pretty straightforward. It's a platformer, a side-scrolling platformer, but what I like about it is that it's not just a left to right. There's a lot of exploration and hidden stuff that you can find around the levels. Each X-Men... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's not a classic beat-em-up, start left, move right kind of thing.
No, it's not a beat-em-up at all. It's more of a platformer. It's more of I guess a Castlevania type of game, with levels where, but again, you can go up and down, you can go left and right, you can find hidden secrets. There's in fact a lot of areas where you come across a door that needs to be unlocked. You have to go find the switch somewhere else in the level. So there's a lot of exploration that's expected of you, and all with that, you're fighting enemies in the different areas. And you have essentially 2 attacks. You've got your kind of melee attack, punching and kicking. So whatever the character does, and each character has their own stats, by the way. So certain characters are better. For example, and I found it hilarious, but it's so true. But Cyclops sucks at fighting in this game. He's the worst hand-to-hand combatant. Which is true, because in the series, when did he ever fight? Right? He just always would go for the laser eyes.
Why wouldn't you?
Well, exactly. It's kind of, yeah. So
what do you want to do? Hand-to-hand combat, or just literally open your eyes?
Yeah. So I get it. Listen, and funnily enough, that's the second most powerful attack in the game is his optic blast. You can
What's the number 1?
I think it's funnily enough, I think it's Nightcrawler's teleport, because that's his
really?
power. Yeah, he can teleport all around if you control it. But then if you teleport you can teleport through enemies. You can teleport through a string of bad guys and it kills them in one hit. which I thought was kind of cool. But it's hard to control. That's why it's not the most. It's not honestly. Cyclops is the most well-rounded for that, and he also jumps the highest too, for what it's worth. He's the Luigi of this game. And what I love about it is you can switch characters kind of midway through. Like you can change, but there's only a certain amount of times you're allowed to change per level, which I didn't realize. Well, I forgot about it because as a kid I'm sure I knew that. But and so so you have Gambit, whose power is he's got the cards because you have 2 meters. And I apologize, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place here, but I'm so excited about this game.
Okay.
You got their health bar, and then you got their mutant power bar. The mutant power bar will regenerate. So if you use up all your optic blasts with Cyclops and you don't have like a power refill nearby, if you wait around, it will slowly refill. Certain characters use up more power more quickly. Like, for example, Gambit's cards use up a ton of mutant power, but they're like, his cards are like homing missiles. They literally home in on the enemies that you're firing them at, which is kind of cool. So it's very effective. And you can hold it and charge it and throw like more cards and whatever. Wolverine's power, as much as I loved it as a kid because I always picked Wolverine, he's really the worst character in the game because his jump sucks. His hand-to-hand combat is fine, and then his power is his claws. So I always thought as a kid that his claws were his power because that was this game. I thought, oh, his power is his claws. But every time you would had your claws out, the meter would slowly just tick down. And that was it. Like, it made your attacks more powerful, and you could do cool, like, sliding, like, jumping, dashing strikes with the claws. But then you had what was called the Berserker Rage, where if your power got down too low, he would just start spazzing out, and then he would hurt himself and lose health. And it's like, what the hell? And it didn't make sense to me. But he is the only character in the game, and I didn't realize this until later, that if you wait around, his health will slowly regenerate because he does have his healing powers. But I never knew that was his powers back in the day because I didn't think to pay attention to that. I just thought, oh, his power is his claws, which is why he was so cool.
Yeah, the early X-Men games, the whole... You would get penalized for them using their powers, which is what made you want to be a fan.
Right.
And buy the toys and read the comics and watch the shows, like essentially punishing you. Oh, you wanted to use Cyclops' blast? Yeah, here's a little bit.
Yeah. Well...
not too much.
But, I mean, I get it. Because if you think about it, too, like... has there been an X-Men game where their powers don't deplete somehow?
I mean, fighting games.
Yeah, but that's because it's like a special move you have to do. That's, I mean, I guess.
No. Like regular Wolverine has his claws at all times.
That's fair. But he also doesn't regenerate his health in those games either.
That's true.
Because everyone would pick him if that was the case. You know what I mean? You just wait and block and regenerate. Yeah. Anyway, so you're going through all these levels. You can change, and so it reminds me kind of like the old Ninja Turtles game on the Nintendo. The original one, not the arcade one, but the original one, because you could change out characters and they each had their own individual health bars. So certain characters were better for certain levels, so you would want to change into that character for different levels. And what I love, too, about this game is not only do you have the 4 X-Men that you can play as, you've got helper characters. They're like summons.
Yes.
If you played Final Fantasy back in the day, they're like summons. And so you had Storm. So 3 of the 4 summons were like did massive damage to whatever's on screen, and then you had Iceman. So we'll start with Iceman, actually. Iceman, basically, you hit him, and he gives you an ice bridge, so you can walk across areas. You really never have to use him, and he can beat the game. I've seen it done. But he gives you a bridge if you need help walking across a certain spot. Then you have Storm, who basically flies down from the top, covers the area with lightning and whatever, kills all the bad guys. It's amazing. Then you have Rogue, who comes in and just does like a flying dash punch. And then you have a character that for the longest time I never knew who he was until I saw him in the cartoon. You have Archangel, and he comes down shooting like arrow or missiles out of his wings left to right, back and forth. Again, massive damage to anything on the screen. So you get those. They can only use them one time, and you also have Jean Grey in this game, where if you fall off of a cliff, or if you're playing 2 players, because this is a co-op game as well, on the screen at the same time, you can have Jean Grey carry one character over to wherever you are to keep moving forward. So if you're playing with somebody like I did back in the day, my brother who sucked at this game, my younger brother, not my middle brother, he was amazing at this game. You could transport him across with you, kind of like you can with the modern Mario games on like the Wii.
I liked using Storm as my helper.
Yes, she was fantastic. What are your... okay, let me ask you, because I like Storm a lot more now than I ever did as a kid. Like, from this new series and whatnot. Like, what are your thoughts?
I always liked Storm.
Yeah.
I liked her in every incarnation.
Yeah.
I thought Halle Berry did an amazing job as Storm in all the movies.
Yep.
Dialogue wasn't the best.
No.
But I always think the character was portrayed as extremely powerful, extremely intelligent.
Right.
Everything. I've always maintained the same level of idea of the way I viewed Storm was second in command.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do that, and I still view that now with the X-Men 97. It's Cyclops, and then it's Storm.
Yeah.
And then if Cyclops does walk away from the X-Men, it's Storm's going to be in charge, as well as she should be. I mean, she's a Omega level, mutant.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And yeah, and it's funny because again, I mean, you think about it in like modern times, like not only a minority character, but a female minority character. And to us as kids, it was like, yeah, of course she's got to be the lead. She's great. You know what I mean? Like you don't think about, honestly, I don't think I knew she was black for the longest time. If that sounds, I'm sorry, that sounds weird, but like I didn't think of her as like, oh, she's a black character. You know what I mean?
That's the way. That's the innocence of being a child. I guess
is what it is.
It's always been suggested that discrimination is something that is
learned.
Exactly. Yep. By somebody. So if we're watching X-Men, okay, I'm a boy, she's a girl, and she has darker skin than I do. Okay, and?
Right, yeah. And
who gives a shit?
Which is honestly kind of the whole theme of X-Men if you think about it, as far as learned prejudice, So, anyway, so with this game, like I said, you've got 6 levels. You've got the Savage Land, you've got the Shi'ar, you've got the Excalibur Lighthouse, you've got Days of Future Past, you've got Mojo Land or whatever it's called, and then you wrap up with Mojo. I love Mojo.
Wait, you gotta talk about that?
Oh, we will. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure there's a whole thing, and yeah, we'll get to it. I promise you. So, just so you know. If you've played the original X-Men on Sega Genesis and you know how amazing this game is, there's an entire section that would piss you off as a kid until you realize what you had to do to beat the game.
Piss you off? If you had a Genesis Model 3, you legitimately could not play the game.
Okay, fair. All right, let's talk about it now then. So there's a part in the game where you're fighting through it. It's in the Mojo level. So Mojo is one of the bosses in the game, and after you beat him, you get to the end of the level and you smash this screen or whatever, and you're just sitting there. And this is the only level in the game that has a timer, okay? Where the timer's counting down, and if it counts down, I think the game is over. I think it ends. Like, everything is done. So you're sitting there, and so many times I would get there and go, where the hell do I go now? And I'm just standing there, the timer ticks down, slowly, game over. What the hell? And back then, we didn't have the internet to look up what the hell you're supposed to do. Until one day, my brother said, all right, well, let's just start over. Maybe we missed something. Hits the reset button on the console, but he doesn't press it too hard. Because you have to do what's called a soft reset. Apparently, there was a difference back in the day between a hard reset and a soft reset of your Sega Genesis, and for the life of me, I don't know the differences.
Well, it's kind of like, I guess, if you hold down the power button on your cell phone, you can lock it or you can shut it down.
I guess. But back then, I didn't realize that was a thing on an analog system back in the day. But anyway, so here's what happens. We talked about how this virus has infected the Danger Room. They've decided through the in-game cutscenes, you learn the only way to stop the virus is you got to reset the program. You're like, all right, cool. So I'm probably gonna have to smash something in the game. No, you literally have to reset your Sega Genesis, and then you get to the screen with a bunch of binary code showing up, and it's basically saying, all right, virus has been eliminated, and then the music starts up. Which, by the way, didn't talk about it yet. One of the best Sega Genesis soundtracks of all time in this game.
It's so Sega. That soundtrack is so Sega.
I think of the theme song of this game just as much as I think of the actual X-Men animated series theme song as far as X-Men in my head.
So do you skip that either?
No, absolutely not.
You don't skip that shit.
No, you don't. Oh, God. Makes me want to smash my controller in a good way.
Right? In a good way.
So anyway, you reset the game, the virus goes away, all of a sudden you're like, all right, we're going to go, we found out the source, it's Magneto, we're going to go to Asteroid M and we're going to beat him. And then you got to go through the last level, and again, it's not that hard. From what I've seen, I've never actually done it myself, so I've never gotten there.
What?
I told you, I've never beaten the game. I've never even gotten to the last level.
It's one of your favorite games of all time.
Yes,
you never beat it?
It's one of the few favorite games that I've never beaten. There's a couple.
Wow.
Are there favorite games of yours that you've never beaten?
No.
Really?
Yeah, if it's my favorite game, it's because I beat it from beginning to end.
Okay.
Maybe not as a child.
Yeah.
I didn't beat them,
Right.
but as an adult, I made the attempt and I beat
Well,
them.
I haven't played this game since I was a kid, man. So, like, I'm sure if I played it now, like, I never got around to it. But if I did, I probably could. It probably wouldn't be.
But if he did, he would.
If I did, I would. Yeah, exactly. But you fight Magneto at the end, you beat it, and that's it. So it's pretty straightforward. But it's been called one of the hardest games of all time. There's a few cheap spots where like bad guys just knock you off stuff. The bosses are kind of hard in some areas. So by the way, we didn't talk about the bosses, but in the game there's like mid bosses and then there's end of the level bosses. So in the first level there's two bosses. There's Juggernaut halfway through and he's pretty easy. And then you have I forget her name now. She's a character from like the Shi'ar.
Yeah, she's the Shi'ar Empire is like the evil sister.
Well, no, that's Deathbird. She's in the second level.
Okay.
There's one in the middle, and I thought that's who it was. I forget her name now, but I think she's like a sorcerer. She's in the animated series because I typed her name in and saw her screenshot from the cartoon. But then you got Deathbird in the second one. So I guess technically there's only one boss in the second level. It's Deathbird because you've got like a spaceship travel. In the third level, which is the lighthouse, you've got Sabretooth halfway through, which is kind of cool, right? Because I always used to use Wolverine, and I always knew that Wolverine and Sabretooth hated each other. And by the way, if you've saved up your little summon mutants to help out, like the bosses are a fucking cakewalk. It's not even anything. Like literally, you can beat Juggernaut with Storm and Rogue in one fell swoop and not touch him, and that's it. But you got to be mindful because then they're gone. You can't get them back. So you fight Sabretooth, and then I thought this was kind of back in the day. I didn't know any better. These days, knowing who he is, I'm like, this is stupid. But in the world, the level 3 boss is Apocalypse.
Yeah, that's a little.
Like, come on. Like, he deserved his own game. Like, but I know that now. Back in the day, I'm like, I didn't even know who it was. I'm like, who's this guy?
Well, he does on the GameCube, right? Wasn't that Rise of Apocalypse or Age of Apocalypse?
There's one of those. Yeah, it was whatever the opposite of whatever the movie was. I said earlier in the episode. But yeah, so I mean, he gets his just due eventually. But like back then, I'm like, now looking back, I'm like, that's kind of silly to have him just as a regular boss, you know. And then in the next level, where you're in Days of Future Past in the future, you fight a guy named Ahab. Never heard of that guy. Apparently, he's like a teleporting pirate or something, and he's cheap as hell. He's one of those where you remember you do remember this because remember the Super Nintendo Power Rangers game that I hate so much
the guy that goes teleports and stuff.
That's who it reminds me of. And that's another reason why I hate the Power Rangers game on Super Nintendo. But that's another. I won't say ever. We will not review that first. I will tell you. Well, I was gonna say maybe we'll make it like a bet on something we bet on later in life. Like we'll make it a wager, or like if we ever set up like a poll for our listeners, like and you vote, like I'll review it. It's fine. But anyway, and then you've got Mojo, who is awesome. And again, I guess there's only one boss in that level too. Mojo is I love Mojo. Do you remember Mojo from the original series?
I don't.
You don't remember Mojo? So like he transports them to like this alternate like TV themed, like it's like the silliest episode of the original series. Like he brings them into like he's got Mojo vision, and so basically he's just trying to bring in ratings, so he brings in the X-Men to fight as gladiators. It's almost the premise of Space Jam, if you've ever seen the movie Space Jam, where he like where the dude voiced by Danny DeVito brings in the aliens and the basketball players to play against each other for ratings, to bring in new attractions. So Mojo's basically doing the same thing with the X-Men, and so you fight him in this level. And this is where I wanted to bring up X-Men 97, because there's an episode 5 or whatever it's called, 4. Pardon me, it's called Motendo. And Jubilee plays a video game that sucks her into a Mojo virtual reality, and Mojo comes back again, and he's great. But the video game for X-Men that she plays looks almost identical to the artwork of the Sega Genesis cartridge.
Yes, that I noticed.
Oh.
And by the way, it is X-Men Rise of Apocalypse on Nintendo GameCube.
Oh my god. You've been looking this up the whole time?
I looked that up, and the prices for X-Men games are astronomical right now.
Bullshit, because you can't. They're not backwards compatible. You can't play them except on the original hardware.
No, so like this on eBay is going for, before taxes and shipping, is going for $40. So this is going to be, it would be a almost $50 game.
The one we're talking about today, the Sega one?
No, I'm talking about the Rise of Apocalypse on GameCube.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I mean that
because emulation's not really that good on GameCube yet. I'll look up how much Sega Genesis this game is.
I don't think
for.
it's much, honestly. Yeah, it's not like it was like a rare game or whatever. But anyway, so you fight Mojo, and then you got Magneto at the end there. So did you? Because I know you didn't play it as a kid. I know you're playing it specifically for this episode. What were your thoughts on it, man? Because again, you're playing it without the nostalgia goggles on. Objectively speaking, is this a game that holds up today for you? And it's okay if
by
it
the way,
sorry.
$15 to $20 is what the game goes for
this game. Okay.
Right now.
Not bad.
Yes. No, not bad.
Yeah.
It didn't age well to me.
Okay.
But the nostalgia is very strong because it's a game in that generation. It's different than playing like Mario games or a sports game. So to me, if I'm playing a Mario game and it's old school Mario, that was just that Mario of that particular generation. There's different incarnations of it. Mm-hmm. Sports games, same thing. It was that era. That's it. But there's other versions of it. Yes, there's been other X-Men games, but this is catered towards this time period, this game, this time period, this technology, this TV show. So it has to live on the, you know what I mean? Like this game has to live on Sega Genesis.
And I was gonna say, like, I feel like because there were Super Nintendo X-Men games, I don't think I've ever played any of them, honestly. But I feel like, and maybe it's because of my childhood, whatever association, this X-Men and Sega go together incredibly well because Sega was that hard hitting, you know what I mean? Like just in your face, like. X-Men made sense on the Sega Genesis. And
100%. And it's unless you grew up with it and legitimately grew up with it.
Yeah.
Like we didn't grow up with Atari or anything like that.
Nope.
We can't say how Atari was back in the day. We don't know how big it was because we didn't live it.
Yeah.
We just have read up about it, talked to people that had it, play the games. We can't. And the same thing with the generation above us that have PS2, GameCube, Xbox as their first systems, they can't relate to right place, right time. It made sense. The X-Men made more sense to be on Sega than on Nintendo.
Yep.
And there were some things that were on Nintendo that just seemed to be a little bit more like a Mickey Mouse game. Like I'm not saying, because there was a great game, Mickey Mouse's Magical Quest is a great game. But just the tone, it was Nintendo. It seemed to be better, more family friendly. X-Men was effing X-Men,
right?
You know,
it
was hard hitting. It was in your face. It was not blood and guts, but violence. And the women were covered, but they had curves. And they there's left to your imagination, but you didn't have to use too much as an imagination as a kid. But it's not a great game.
No.
But at the time, it was. I could see that it was a great game.
That's
because it's everything you wanted it to be.
Right. Well, and I was thinking maybe we start doing this with the show of like 3 categories. You know, does it hold up now? Would it have held up back then? Or how would, or like, you know, does it look at graphics? I don't know. I want to figure out a way to like start ranking our games that we do because I feel like you know.
I think I can. Yeah, I know what you mean. Does it hold up? No, it doesn't hold up now.
Yeah.
Does it? Did it hold up back then? Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It was great.
Right.
And you know, how about this? Could a remake of it work?
And I think the answer is 100% yes. I would.
Yes.
If they made an X-Men 97 side-scrolling platforming X-Men game, I would pay. I would pay full price for that.
But I think the nostalgia would be stronger on a X-Men 97 game like the arcade game.
Like a beat 'em up. Yeah.
I think that is what people would want over something that's a little bit... It's not a beat 'em up, but it's not an adventure game. This is like that in between. You know how they say that when you're a kid, those awkward years?
Yes.
Of like you're like 12, 13, 14 years old. Some of these games on Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis were those awkward in-between games.
Yes.
Because everything on original Nintendo was start left, move right.
Yep.
Everything on the beginning of Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, start left, move right. When you get to the PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn, they're at least trying to get to 3D. Or they're in early stages of 3D, which were fugly also. This kind of game is that awkward age, early teenage year kind of game.
Yeah.
It's not this, but it's not that. I see what you're going for, but you're not there yet.
Right. It's right in between. I will say, though, in my opinion, I feel like peak 2D gaming was done on Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo in general. So at least from a visual standpoint, we'll say.
Yes.
Because I think this game looks great. I mean, even for modern standards. I don't know.
But the thing, when I texted you about this game and another game I was playing, said it looks like shit. Like, yeah, you're watching on a freaking, like, 60-inch TV on an emulator. I'm like, yeah.
You can't argue that, right? I mean...
Yeah.
So, I mean, and then there's certain games, like, I could play an old-school Mario game on a big screen and not say, oh, this looks like shit, because it's Mario. By the way, the game in question, in case you guys are wondering what he texted me about, was the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie game for the Sega Genesis, which is the definitive Power Rangers video game, in my opinion, but I digress. Yeah, I think this game, I think it's visually beautiful. Again, the music fucking slaps. It's an amazing soundtrack. And it's, so the gameplay, I think the gameplay is probably the thing that's held up the least, as far as, you know, there's been better platformers or what have you. And again, if they ever made another X-Men platformer with improved whatever, I feel like they totally could. It would be amazing.
Just like the Turtles did.
Yeah, absolutely. The first Turtles game on the Nintendo was ass. Like, I mean, back...
No, I meant Shredder's Revenge.
Oh, you're talking about the remake? Yes. Oh, the beat 'em up is amazing. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
If they did that with X-Men 97, dude, fuck, I would buy...
They did that for Power Rangers.
Yep.
Wasn't as nowhere near as big as Turtles, but they did that.
Yep.
They did that for Turtles. They did that for Streets of Rage did it.
They did
not that long ago.
They did Double Dragon.
They did a Double Dragon.
They did a Battletoads remake.
Do this.
Yeah.
Come on, it's right there.
I know.
It's right there.
And do you remember the Motendo episode? How many she basically was in the X-Men arcade game playing through it?
Yes.
That was amazing.
Yes.
Like, I was happy.
So now that I will go on how that and The Simpsons were not released on home consoles by Konami, but Turtles in Time was. Not saying like Turtles in Time was not worthy of it. I mean, out of the three, it probably is the most worthy out of the three.
Yeah.
It's the most complete game out of the three.
Agreed.
But it's criminal.
Yeah.
Criminal that
they could have released a version of X-Men the arcade game on Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo even. I would, you know what I mean? Like, you had beat 'em ups.
Man, if I'm Konami, I'm calling Disney like, listen, we got it. We put it up there. We'll split it 50-50.
Well, the problem is Konami doesn't make video games anymore, really. They're mostly in like the what are they called machines? Like Plinko machines, I think now, or like gambling machines.
Are they?
I think that's where they're doing a lot of their stuff now. But I would love it or even hell, if they like licensed it out to like an indie studio, not an indie studio, but like a third party beat 'em up studio.
Do it.
Hell, did you know they just recently they're putting out a G.I. Joe beat 'em up game? And a Toxic Crusaders game. Remember that cartoon series?
But that's what our generation wants.
Yes.
Because like we've been saying, it sounds terrible. What have you been playing? This guy's been playing the same game for the last 3 episodes. Because we're fucking adults and we have lives and we can't sit down and devote 5 hours of gaming.
Yeah.
If I can get 5 hours of gaming in a month, I'm happy.
Yes, absolutely.
So if I got 5 hours and I get a beat 'em up, that's going to take me 5 hours.
Right.
I'm more inclined, and a lot of people our age, in their mid-30s, with careers and significant others and children and houses and mortgages and all that good shit that makes your hair go gray or grow away.
Yep.
I'm more likely to buy a remake of X-Men the arcade game for $20. Not because of the price, but I'm just saying, for $20, buy that game that's going to take me 5, 6, 7 hours to beat, then GTA, whatever number, whenever it comes out, and I'm not going to be able to beat it.
Yeah.
I don't have the time.
Yeah. And that's...
Now, I understand the kids in college and high school, sure, go for it. God bless. You got the whole summer to yourself. Sit at home in your underwear. Go for it. Do it.
That was us back in the day, but like... I can't do it now, so I got to play the games that I know I could beat in an hour or two. You know what I'm saying? So before we kind of wrap up with like pop culture in general, I wanted to share some thoughts. So my brother Adam, who is a longtime listener of the show, he did text in.
He better be.
He is. No, he is. Because this was a game that he and I played all the time back in the day, and he could beat it. I couldn't. He was always better than me at video games. Like I'm 36. I could now admit my brother was better than me at most video games. Not all of them, but most of them. And so I said, dude, text me, like, what do you remember about this game? And so he goes, well, I remember, so I totally forgot about this. Apparently there's a glitch where you can use Gambit to level skip all the way up to the Days of Future Past world.
Really?
I had no idea. But now that I think about it, I remember he would always do something funky, so he would just keep skipping levels. I'm like, oh, that's how you do it. That's how he could beat it so fast, because he would skip. He talked about Nightcrawler was way overpowered. There's a big gap in one of the levels where you can't get past it without teleporting or with Iceman, so you hopefully didn't use up Iceman's bridge. He talked about hitting reset after you beat Mojo's world to actually beat the game. Nightcrawler was great about, because what was great, and I can second this, Nightcrawler, as I talked about, could teleport. He literally, if you had to go up and around and back down to move past the level, you could teleport right through the wall to get to it. It was like ridiculously overpowered. That's why I always loved Nightcrawler. Same thing with like an elevator. If you missed the jump for the elevator, you can do it again. I'm reading his text. Cyclops was useless except for jumping really high. I'm like, yep, that tracks. And then Wolverine could accidentally kill himself if he double jumped with his claws without enough energy. He'd go berserk and drain all of his health. And Gambit's power was the most decent, but he used way too much energy. So yeah, pretty much what we kind of already talked about as far as that goes.
Yep.
Oh my god, I love this game. I know it's not the best game, and it certainly won't be the best game winning any awards anytime soon, but I love it. It's got a place near and dear to my heart, so super excited. All right, let's talk about what's going on in the world of March of 1993, okay? We'll kind of go through music, movies, TV, and wrap up with sports.
Okay.
In the world of music, really not much of an impact here for me, but I'd be curious to see if you have any thoughts on it. Depeche Mode's Songs of Faith and Devotion came out in March of 1993. Does that mean anything to you?
That reshaped my entire life.
Well, I will say this, because I know I actually, funnily enough, know specific people that listen to the show that like Depeche Mode. You'll be happy to know, listeners, the album represented a significant shift in the style for their band, incorporating more organic sounds with the use of electric guitars and real drums alongside traditional electronic music. So there you go, Depeche Mode, shout out on the show. Obviously. Now, in the world of film, different story here. I feel like we got some actually, I think both of these movies that came out right around this time you'd be very excited about. Now, the first one actually...
This is May, you said?
Well, March of 93.
March, okay.
Now, the first movie we're talking about actually came out in February of 93, but was still near the top in March, so I want to give it a shout out. Groundhog Day.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That was in 93?
February of 1993, so over 30 years ago the movie came out.
Wow, I thought that was like a late 80s movie.
Oh, okay, you thought he was even older? No, this was 1993, directed by Harold Ramis and starring Bill Murray.
Yes.
This was actually the movie, by the way, that made them have a big falling out, if you didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yep. So, one of the best movies of all time. Go on. You know, it's funny, too. I saw something on Reddit where like, hey, you know what they should do? They should say they're going to remake Groundhog Day and then just put the same movie in theaters.
Yeah,
and it's like, yeah.
Ironically,
I would.
Ironically, about that movie, the next time they worked together was Ghostbusters, the video game, and they didn't work together like directly. They were just the same project they were involved.
They were in separate. Yeah, they didn't record together, right?
They didn't record together. I think Aykroyd and Ramis were the only two that recorded together.
Yeah, and they always
no bad blood with Ernie Hudson. It was just scheduling conflicts.
Right. Well, and I think weren't Ramis and Aykroyd always like super close afterwards? Like they always stayed close. So I forget what it was, but like I don't know if Groundhog Day was like the straw that broke the camel's back or what. But I know like there was some creative issues in general between Ramis and Bill Murray, but I don't know if it was just this movie or if there was other stuff that was happening. Or
I believe it started at Ghostbusters 2 because the studio wouldn't let Bill Murray do another movie until he did Ghostbusters 2, and he said to Howard Ramis, just kill me in the first screen,
right?
The first scene, please.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just steamrolled, and
gotcha.
Life's too short, and
it
just shit happens. Apologize and move on.
Well, and I think they did before Harold Ramis passed away. I think they did.
No, literally on his deathbed.
It was on his. Okay, so they
Yeah.
which is, I mean, that's good. It's sad, but it's good that at least
Yeah.
there's some closure there. Okay, on a lighter note, in March of 1993, one of the shittiest sequels ever was released. Do you care to take a guess?
No, I don't know what it is.
It is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3.
Oh my god! Well, how about this? This isn't the first time we talked about Turtles today,
No, it's not.
because we were talking about the arcade game.
Yeah.
In fact, our next episode is going to be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game on Nintendo.
On Nintendo. There it is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for specifying.
Which is actually technically it's the second TMNT game on the original Nintendo.
Yes.
Based on the arcade game by Konami, who made the X-Men one, who never released it.
Yes. It's perfect organic transition. I love it.
Yes.
Yes. So, spoiler alert: we are talking Turtles 2, the arcade game for Nintendo, on the next episode, which I'm very excited.
All about that Konami code.
There it is, man. Which I didn't realize for the longest time worked on the Ninja Turtles game, and then when I did, it was a game.
That's where I learned to use it, because goddamn that game.
Yeah. No, I learned it.
All Turtle games. Not all. The first two.
Yeah.
On Nintendo were tough.
Hard as hell. Anyway, so back to Turtles 3 came out March 19th, 1993. Not called Turtles in Time, by the way, just the game. But remember people call this movie Turtles in Time because they time traveled to Japan.
Well, yeah, because the game was so great and the movie was so shitty.
Yeah, they had to do something to cope, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. But that game should be nowhere associated with that piece of shit.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Here we go. This one probably not relevant for you, but longtime collaborator of the show, Dan Vorbeck, will appreciate this. Star Trek Deep Space Nine premiered in March of 1993.
Nice.
Actually, no, it's premiered in January 93, but it was really starting to build up momentum by March of 1993. So, because you're not a Star Trek guy, right? You never really got into it. No, same.
No.
Now, Beth, my wife, loves Star Trek, and she's a huge Deep Space Nine fan. But it was a very popular addition to the Star Trek lore, as I'm sure Dan Vorbeck will attest as well. And also premiering in March of 1993, we had the incredibly famous and very popular Beavis and Butthead on MTV.
Oh, okay. Yeah, wasn't allowed to watch that back in the day.
Oh, me neither. I remember I snuck watching Beavis and Butthead Do America, the movie. Like, I wasn't supposed to watch it, and then I did, and I'm like, oh, there's cartoon boobies. And it wasn't even boobs. It was like cleavage, it wasn't even nudity. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
So 90s. That should be a game. I mean, that's a terrible game, but
dude, I love that game.
Review.
I would absolutely do that. I would do the Sega Genesis version again, but
putting it on the list literally
add
right
it to
now.
the queue, man. We got a good backlog. And then finally, in the world of sports, I'm going to lean on you a little bit for this because I wasn't able to dig up much as far as specifically in March. All I came up with was that Michael Jordan was on his way to scoring his 7th consecutive scoring title for the NBA. Okay. I guess that would have been mid-season of 1993.
Okay.
So can you think of anything else that was going on in March of 93 that would have been significant in sports?
Now, baseball is just about to start.
Yeah.
Hockey's at its end. I could tell you it wasn't March of 93, but off the top of my head, so you figure probably 2 months later, 93 was the last time a Canadian team won the Yeah, it was the last time. I believe the last time a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup was the 1993 Montreal Canadiens.
Okay, there it is.
So think about that. Canada has not won a Stanley Cup in 30 years.
Yeah.
To be determined right now.
And if I recall correctly, the Canadians and the Leafs have a very heated rivalry, right? So that was like a big.
Oh, of course.
That was a big thing back then.
Yeah. Still is.
Oh yeah, of course it is. Okay. So. Well, there's one more thing in the world of sports.
Sure.
And I'm using sports loosely here. Without looking, who was WWF champion in March of 1993?
I don't know when WrestleMania 9 was.
That was in April.
So it
was in April.
Okay, so March of 93 is Brett.
There it is. Okay. Yep. And I'm double checking because I know he had won it from Ric Flair, but I think that was before March.
Yeah, because he was champion before March.
That's what I thought. Okay.
He was champion in, I think, end of 92.
Okay, there it is. All right, cool.
So we're building up for Brett versus Yoko, and then Yoko wins, and then Hogan goes, "That's not going to work for me, brother."
That's right. And then he goes away
takes
again.
the title.
And he goes away, King of the Ring.
Many would say this is the shit. We are on the cusp of the worst WrestleMania of all time, and April '93.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that.
99.
I'm pretty sure we have a previous episode of Generation S out there somewhere talking about the worst WrestleManias of the 90s. So,
yes.
And the best WrestleManias in the 90s, for that note.
Yep.
Maybe okay, I'm going to add this going forward. Starting this week and going forward, I'm going to ask you who the WWF champion was in the month that the game was released.
I love it.
And we'll see if you can do it without cheating, okay?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us. And again, no big tease for next week because we already kind of spoiled it. We're talking Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game next week. Apparently every week is my favorite game of all time. But no, truly, another game that I grew up with.
I swear to God, I really like this game.
I swear I do. I've beaten it, so you'll know that now. Yes, I beat it back in the day.
Hey, you beat it.
It's not easy, but I beat it back in the day. What a journey it was, and we'll talk all about it next week. And guys, until then, if you like the direction we're going, if you like retro gaming, if you like the fact that we're kind of mixing in a little pop culture, a little nostalgia with our gaming discussions, tell a friend, let them know. Let them know what we're doing over here. The numbers looked really good last week. Let's try to get it again this week. We're trying to get my personal goal, and again, this may mean nothing by the time you listen to this, but my personal goal is to get 150 downloads a week of different episodes that we put out. So last week we came close to it. Let's see if we can get it this week. Let somebody else know. Maybe go back and catch up on some old episodes. Leave a review on iTunes or on Spotify if you can. That helps get us up there on the rankings for like nostalgia stuff. It really does make a difference. And check us out on YouTube, by the way. We're doing some stuff over there with regard to old school pro wrestling, video games, Power Rangers still a little bit. So and if you're listening to this on YouTube, by the way, thank you, because we put this out it's the following week, right? So when this comes out, it'll have been out for a week prior. That's right, on the other platforms.
And the other thing about YouTube is there's another dimension. Obviously, we're showing game footage. We're doing a playthrough.
Exactly.
Like last week, we did a Galactic Conquest during the Republic era, and then obviously some of them are going to be a little challenging of what we're going to pick and do. Like, we're not going to pick for Ghostbusters. We didn't pick the entire game because it's a 6, 7, 8 hour game. So we picked the level.
Although, truthfully, we could probably beat this game in 45.
No, this game, this game has been, it's done. This game is probably wrapping up right now as we are. We're wrapping up without even looking at the game, just looking at the timestamps. It's probably wrapping up or it's done, and you're just seeing the image of the title card.
So there you go. So listen to it first on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, and then listen a week later on YouTube. Put it on in the background and get some video game, background gameplay footage. Why not, right? All right, guys, gonna wrap it up for us. Thank you so much for hanging out, Lou. As always, thank you for tag teaming this with me. It's been
no problem.
So much fun. We're heading into week 5 of the show next week, so very exciting. And talking Turtles 2, the arcade game next week. We'll be back with a brand new episode of Backwards Compatible, a Generation S retro gaming podcast. And until then, we'll talk to you soon.
Goodbye.
But it's good. All right. Well, we're almost 25 minutes in.
Yeah, let's just talk about the game now.
I guess. So this whole thing is a retro gaming podcast. Might as well. All right. X-Men